Oh, I forgot to turn my mic off in the beginning of that, so I didn't get ready for the normal promo. So here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the LGS Pod, the Soccer Shorts companion podcast, where we shine a spotlight on stories about local grassroots soccer culture here in our hometown of San Diego, as well as across the US and around the world. I'm John Cross, founder of Soccer Shorts, and with me tonight, as always, is our co host Dylan Wilson. Dylan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. It has been a decent week for me sports wise.
That's good. And I'll try to see if we can keep our technical glitches here to a minimum. Um, Not sure what happened there, but I started speaking and realized nothing was happening. But I think we got that squared away. Um, Before we kind of do a quick little preview of the show, do you have any big news, big soccer news, anything special to talk
Um,
about, or are we ready to
yeah,
jump right in?
it's not actually soccer related, but I think it does fit the general billing of this podcast, i.e., lower league or independent sports news. The Oakland Ballers actually won the Pioneer League 2 nights ago, in only their second season of existence and first season since the A's have left Oakland. So all it actually took for Oakland to win a baseball championship again was actually John Fisher leaving, it turns out. But yeah, they've built something really special there. And the Pioneer League, I think, is really interesting because it's like officially unaffiliated, but they have some sort of like constructive player development agreement with the MLB and the MILB. So I don't really know the details of that. But anyway, it was very cool to see them do well. I think they actually had the winningest season in Pioneer League history, which goes all the way back to like the
Wow.
1930s, and actually used to be a minor league affiliate and became not an affiliate. I think after the pandemic, MILB restructured a lot, which is minor league baseball, and cut the Pioneer League, and then the Ballers joined in the 2024 season. So they've really not only helps to continue the long tradition of winning baseball in Oakland, but they've done it by revitalizing an old part of West Oakland called Raimondi Park, which really got run down in the last few decades, but was the home of Oakland baseball for a long time, and is where a lot of really MLB greats got their start playing. So it was cool that they refurbished that. It's there's like now a market that's open up near there, and it's really revitalizing the West Oakland neighborhood. So it's a cool story through and through, and for them to win on the field was really awesome. I managed to not a free stream, but find a stream to watch. Game 5 of 5, and they were down 2-0 in the championship series and won the final 3 games to win it 3-2. So it was it was a good night for Oakland.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I, I am not the one to talk about baseball in this country, especially minor league baseball. Um, it's something baseball's been a passing interest at best for me for most of my life. I certainly love my San Diego teams,
Sure,
but baseball hasn't been there. But my understanding of the Ballers and with the fallout of the A's, it has had strong community support. Is that
100%.
correct?
A hundred
Yeah.
percent. And I was actually watching an interview with some fans today, and I could have sworn I could have been watching a Loyal interview, right? This guy was talking
Yeah.
about coming
Yeah.
with his kids and like the words he used, like intimacy and community. This is like again, I could have been listening to a Loyal interview. But yeah, I won't get too much into it. But obviously baseball doesn't have the promotion and relegation history that soccer does around the world. Although I'm sure there are places in the world that do that. Anyway, I digress. That said, the history of baseball and the way that MLB kind of took over baseball all over the country is not super dissimilar to the way that MLS has
Yeah.
cannibalized a lot of smaller leagues in the United States. So I think if we were to ever talk about that, you'd see a lot of disappointing parallels. But yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sure.
I think the Pioneer League, they talk a lot about like they focus on community driven, like local identity focused clubs. So again, it sounds like the USL. I think I love it.
Well, that's, in terms of parallels and looking at things, it to me, it drives home the point once again that if you can connect with your community,
100%.
um, you will be successful. It doesn't matter what it is if you can make that connection with your community. And that, I think, is going to play, as it does almost every episode, into some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So let's give a quick little preview. Today will be part 5 of our Pro-Rel series, and we're going to turn our attention north of the border and take a look at soccer in Canada. And, anybody who's listening to this might think, why Canada, right? We'll get into more of the details of why. It's not, we did England at first because that's where everything really started. We did Japan because of the parallels and starting a professional league around the same time that we did for Major League Soccer, and to see kind of how the two countries have developed over the last 3-ish decades. But Canada is a unique story, and like I said, we'll get into it here in a bit. But it's new to trying to do things in terms of creating an actual pyramid and promotion relegation. And I'll say that with a caveat. Again, we'll get into some more detail in a second. But also, it's a big country like us, and how are they handling the geography in order to try to bring a proper pyramid structure and promotion relegation to Canada? So that'll be our main focus for tonight. But before we do that, as always, let's jump into some news. I don't really have anything that's outside of Cup news and lower league news. I've kind of folded everything in there. So sometimes we pull some key events out. Do you have any current events that are soccer related? Before we jump into our Cup stuff.
Not too much. One thing I always keep tabs on Wrexham. They are through to the 4th round of the EFL Cup, so I think there's a very high chance they draw a Premier League club in the next round, which would be, I think, fun for everybody who's a fan of that project. Just because it's more money, more eyes, it's better competition. I also noticed, this is maybe something we could talk about some other time, but the CONCACAF Central American Cup is going on right now.
Right.
Which I know that's not really like what we're trying to get into here, but I thought that could be something worth putting a pin in. So those were the two things that jumped out at me today.
Okay. Yeah, we did. I'll make a note of that, and maybe that's something we can dive in a little more deeply to some of our, continental tournaments, Absolutely. Some of the other things that go on. And I think any extra eyes we get on how soccer is played, even outside of the U.S., is helpful in understanding how we can best develop our game here in the U.S.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I have a couple of quick things Cup related, then we'll jump into the U.S. Open Cup. But we mentioned last week the Intercontinental Cup has started,
right,
which
yes.
to me is more the true Club World Cup. Pyramids FC won in their first round. Well, they had another match today against the Asian winners, Al Ali, and Pyramids FC won 3-1. So our African champion is moving on. And they are waiting to face the winner of the CONCACAF champion, which is Cruz Azul. And we don't know the CONMEBOL champion yet. So those two will play each other late November, early December. But as soon as we figure out the CONMEBOL champion, and then they have that match against Cruz Azul, that winner will take on Pyramids FC. And then the winner of that match will take on PSG. So this, again, it's stretched out. It's not a tournament, but as I said last week, I like this one a little better than the Club World Cup and that format, because we're actually taking our actual cup winners from our different confederations and having them play together basically the very next season, like we do worldwide in soccer in all our competitions. You have your league results or whatever results the year before, and then that determines how you play next year. So I don't know that it will, but I really hope the Intercontinental Cup gets some love to look at our current club champions, because as you said last week, we're going to have a Club World Cup or an Intercontinental Cup champion by, I think, the end of December. Probably going to be PSG if I had to put my money on it. But who's going to be the club champion? Is it going to be PSG, or is Chelsea going to be wearing, as we talked about last week?
I did confirm, yes, Chelsea will be wearing that badge for 4 years. For
4 years, right? And we're going to have other people win these competitions in the meantime. It's another thing, as we said last week, that I am less and less in love, even though it was great having teams and fan bases and supporters here and the atmosphere. I don't think anybody thinks that was poor. I just don't like the tournament. I don't like the
Yeah,
concept. I just, as we move further and further away, I look at it um, with more disgust, I guess.
fair enough.
All right, and the other quick, if we turn it back to the U.S., we do have the League for Clubs. Semi or pre-professional, I guess is probably the most appropriate thing to call it right now. They have a fall tournament that's going on at the moment with five or six clubs, all from the Bay Area, from their league that they have up there. And I think pretty much all of those teams were looking to get ready for the US Open Cup qualifying tournament. So that's part of what they're doing. But I have heard a lot of rumors that that league definitely would like to go year round, even though most of the league for clubs is a summer league. And then we also have the NISAs having their fall tournament coming up very soon. I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but just a couple of things to keep an eye on. Because again, more soccer is better overall, and who knows what's going to happen with NISA moving forward. So I'll give you a chance to comment on those, and then we'll jump into the Open Cup.
I just forgot about Nisa. Is really all I have to say. They're still cooking. Good for them.
Yeah, I think that is fair. I mean, we did talk about it several episodes back. They have a new CEO and
That's
a
right.
new
I remember that. Yeah.
commissioner. We'll see. Obviously, we'll see what happens. They've certainly, previous people involved in the leadership structure of NISA have burned some bridges. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll see if
Well,
that can turn around or if those teams might end up somewhere else in the next few years.
and I think we've talked about this on this pod, but the work Nisa has done at the like pre-professional level and the lower
The
levels,
NISA
like
Nation.
right, I think has been excellent. It's their work at the professional level that's been a little bit ridiculous. So glad to know they've still got that kind of all together.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, much of that work that was done in NISA Nation, except for I think the Southwest Premier League, which still I think is technically affiliated with NISA, at least they were the last I checked. Most of the other affiliations have shifted somewhere else. They've
Uh,
either gone back independent or they've realigned with a different group, either the League for Clubs or somebody else. So that's unfortunate because there was a structure starting to take shape there at the NISA Nation level. And I think at least one of the people I think it's the CEO, and I can't remember his name, that is getting involved came directly from the Southwest Premier League. So we'll see. It's going to be. I like the idea of independent teams, and that's really their mantra. You don't have the franchise fees. You don't have territorial rights. It's done more like the rest of the world. But if they can't get a leadership structure in place, then it's really going to be difficult for them. And we'll get to USL in a second. With the speed that USL is moving forward with some things, unless you want to really, really focus just on the pre-professional part, it's going to be, I think, really hard for anyone else to be on the professional side.
well, I would say right. I agree. And I would say too that I hope that people recognize the importance and the value in focusing on those pre-professional aspects of the game because that is good for American soccer overall. And I don't think everybody needs to focus on the professional side. In fact, most
Right.
people shouldn't because most people aren't going to be professional footballers. However, if you are determined to do the professional side, I would rather than trying to compete with the USL, I would look at what they're doing and get excited about how fast they're moving and try to see if I could fold in what I want to do with what they're doing because I think that you're not going to outcompete them before they get this Pro-Rel thing off the ground. It seems like they're pretty set on doing that. So why not try and be a part of it? That would be my approach to it. But then again, I'm not a selfish billionaire, so what do I know?
Yeah, and I certainly don't have any idea what the internal politics are like at the USL ownership level. And I imagine, like any of our closed leagues, it can be an exclusive group.
That's true. That's true.
So unless USL chooses to really open up, and maybe those are discussions that are happening to see how USL can open up more and embrace more of the soccer community moving forward, at least at the professional level.
Well, and
I would
I guess I
hope those conversations are going, but I don't know.
and I guess I should say too that I say that with the in my mind, the only way promotion and relegation will work long term for the USL is they will have to do away with territorial rights. Franchise fees is a different thing. I think they will probably fight harder to not get rid of that because it's free money basically. But um, I think that if promotion and relegation is really going to work, they're going to have to probably pretty quickly do away with territorial rights. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that if that's something you view as important, that you could, presumably be a part of that. But you're right. It's totally up to them. It is for now a completely closed system. So
yeah, well, we'll see how that plays out in terms of the US Open Cup for 2026. As we mentioned last week, we've already completed round 1 of the qualifying tournament. They did the draw after our last podcast, so Thursday or Friday, don't remember which. But then they posted the round 2 pairings, and as we had suspected, the 4 San Diego teams that are currently in the qualifying tournament, they got paired up against each other. So coming up in a couple of weeks on Sunday,
the
I have
12th,
it
I
here.
believe
Where are
you
my
said.
notes? Thank you. Yeah. On Sunday, October 12th, we'll have 2 matches. At 4:30, you're going to have FC Balboa against San Diego Inter. And that's going to be at the Logan Memorial Education Campus. And then at 6 o'clock, which is unfortunate, you can't really hit both games if you wanted to. But at 6 o'clock is going to be City SC against Rebels SC, and that's going to be at Aviara Community Park in Carlsbad. But those are both going to be again on October 12th, and that is round 2 of the US Open Cup qualifying tournament. And I imagine for round 3, the 2 winners are going to face off against each other.
You would think, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to. I don't know. Is there? I have to look at my schedule, make sure I'm actually available. But any of those look?
Well, I think I could make it down to the
More?
Logan Memorial Campus. That's not that far from me. I could take public transit down there, so I might look to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I might. That's actually a bit almost of a direct shot. It's longer. I mean, either one of these is a longer commute for me, but it's probably easiest for me to get to the Logan Memorial Education Campus. So might head on out there and check out and see that match. And then for anybody else, yeah, definitely set your calendars because it would be good to support our local teams that are part of the qualifying tournament, but one of these 4 teams may make it into the US Open Cup proper. So our mantra, always get out and support local soccer when you get the chance. Speaking of locals, we both were not super up on the US Open Cup semifinals for this 2025 edition. But in the Austin, Minnesota match, I got wind of it later with the previews, which I totally forgot, that we didn't promote or anything. And CJ Fodre hasn't been getting, he's been getting some playing time. But he came on in the first period of extra time, I think the 104th minute, around there. But came into the match, and in the 120th minute +2 scores the game winner to send Austin to the finals. Austin now will host the finals against Nashville. So big shout out to local products, CJ Fodry, former Loyal and SDSU player, for scoring. He'll always remember that, right? Game-winning goal in the semifinals of the Open Cup to send your team to the finals. So, and in fact, his I don't know if he has haven't stayed up to see what he's done maybe since the Open Cup and this podcast, like from the weekend. But that was his second game winner he had in about a week. So
Nice.
good news for CJ Fodry.
Very good. Yeah, I love to see him succeeding.
Yeah, let's switch over to some lower league news. The NWSL, which we had mentioned, I don't know how far back, several podcasts ago, that they were looking to do a Division II women's league. That looks like it's being postponed to 2027 at the earliest. But based on Jessica Berman's press conference, they just had a board, a governor's meeting in the NWSL, and had a press conference afterwards with some questions. And I didn't watch it. I read through some of the transcripts, and I don't know that I have super high hopes for the NWSL as a long-term league. Not that they won't be successful, but more in the terms that they're going in the direction of Major League Soccer and all our other professional sports. You just see it based on the conversations, and the second division is not supposed to be feeding in of equal teams that could possibly, promotion, relegation, move up. This second division is supposed to be their reserve teams, really. They're going to call it a Division II league, but it's set up to just be a reserve league, at least right now. And some of the other comments that I won't jump into all the details, but the comments strike me as like MLS. We're following the NFL model and the NBA model, and we want to, and possibly even baseball in terms of having farm teams if we can do it. But really protecting that ownership group that's there.
Yeah. I mean, they've always, I don't think they've ever really made a secret about it. That's
no, I agree with you.
And I would say I've said this several times. They've never struck me as a particularly well-run organization. So I don't know. It's too bad because I think the women's game has more room to try things, right? Like, it's just less established on the world stage. Like they could, or the American stage even. They could try things, and that they're not will always kind of be a bummer.
Well, that was one of the I think key points in the discussion. There were several questions about salary cap, and right now it's locked in for 5 years. And would they look at changing some things? And she kind of, in my opinion, spun it around to, basically, to me, it came off as we know what we're doing. We already have an agreement with the players. We'll revisit it if we need to. But we have so much more to offer in this country than other countries, so people will want to come here to play.
That might not be true for much longer.
Yeah, I really not sure if you say that right now in 2025, there's a whole lot of players thinking, yeah, U.S. is where I want to be. And if someone else is offering me more money, I mean, there might have been a time, I could even think a year ago, that people might say, yeah, I could go there. There's more that I could get, especially depending where you are and raising a family, those kinds of considerations. But who knows moving forward? I thought that was the comments and how they were answered. That's when I was like, yeah, they're just.
I mean, that's kind of American business capitalism, whatever, distilled down.
Control wages as much as possible.
Well, and it's only ever about the next quarter. It's not about 5, 10, 20 years from now. It's only ever about the next, profit margins.
But it is in long distance in terms of we've got the salary cap locked in for the next 5 years. Everyone knows exactly what it's going to be. But there it is on that sense. But
right,
it
when
also
it comes
was
to the
about
workers, it's locked
how
in.
we can how we can market content, and that's another comment we're going to get into with the Canadian soccer stuff here in a second. All right, last couple things in terms of USL. I don't know if you saw, Gio Reyna has become part of the ownership group of Fort Lauderdale United. So another.
Wait, Gio or Claudio Reyna?
Gio.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Gio Reyna has jumped in along with other men's teams players. So Fort Lauderdale United has a new team coming in League One on the men's side, and already has a Super League team playing on the women's side. And apparently, I learned from reading this article that they're going to expand into a bigger club, not just do soccer, and volleyball is one of the things they do. And they have plans to have a professional women's team
That's
in
awesome.
27, I think.
Well, and I know there was just a merger between the two big women's professional volleyball, well, indoor volleyball leagues. I
Yes,
don't know. Yeah.
right.
So is it beach or indoor they're going to do? Do you know? Or I mean, I would assume beach in Miami. Whatever.
Indoor, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Well, shoot, maybe they'll be involved then in that league. That would be awesome. San Diego has a team, of course, which the Mojo is a lot of fun if you've never been. Highly recommend.
Yes, always a good shout out for our local teams. In stadium news, again, it seems like we can't go a few days without some kind of update in USL. This is what I was hinting at a few minutes ago. So the USL is just moving. Greenville, they showed some AI, it looked like, renderings of what their new stadium will look like. But Greenville Triumph play in League One on the men's side, but the Liberty play in USLW. And I think I have heard, and I would need to follow up on this, so don't take this as fact, but I believe on the women's side, they're also looking to possibly jump eventually to the Super League. But they have a new stadium coming in. I think it's supposed to seat about 6,000, somewhere in the 6,000 range.
Yeah.
For that, but fit in architecturally with the downtown area and what they're doing. So
That's
again,
great.
strong news there in Greenville.
Yeah.
And then this one I saw a lot of chatter about online, but the Miami FC.
Yes, I did see
lowest
this.
lowest attendance in USL. Hasn't done much in a few years, but I have a couple comments on that here in a second. But they've announced that a 15,000 seat stadium in Homestead, so a little south of Miami proper, but in Homestead, 15,000 seats. Now, most of the chatter I saw is, why are they doing this? They can't draw. They're last in the league. They have the lowest attendance in the league. A lot of comments like this seems dumb, or they're fishing, or again just the real estate ploy. But I think because Ricardo Silva was the one who made the big offer to MLS, I don't know, a decade now back, of, hey, bring everyone to, like, we'll give you this $1 billion TV contract thing and media contract if you institute promotion relegation. And then after that, we know obviously nothing came of that, but after that, and a couple of good runs by Miami in the Open Cup, and then Inter Miami kind of being a thing, the Miami FC just kind of went quiet. And I think a lot of people were expecting them to leave, but I don't know what, and I don't know anything personally, but historically, what I've read from Ricardo Silva, what I've seen happen, I think this has been a long ploy. My understanding is Ricardo Silva has been very big on going to Division One and instituting promotion relegation. He clearly has the money to do more with the Miami FC. I think he's just biding his time till all this stuff came into place. And as soon as they get to the stadium and the Division One starts ramping up, he's going to start putting money back into the team. There's no consequence. This is what we hate about closed leagues, right? Right now, there's no consequence to him just kind of hanging on and being there. I think now they have the stadium plan. It's going to be 15,000 people, so that means Division One eligibility. I would imagine he's just been saving money, doing the bare minimum to just move along until it's time to ramp everything
Well,
up.
and
I
keep
could
in
be
mind,
totally wrong on that,
you know
but
what?
I think that's what he's doing.
You know why I can tell you you're right. Do you know the name of the stadium at Florida International University where they've been playing the last, I don't know, 8 years?
Oh, just Pitbull, is that what it is?
No, it's the Ricardo Silva Stadium. He paid for it
Oh,
to be
I
built.
thought
They
there was
haven't
something with
they haven't been
Pitbull.
paying rent that whole time. So I think your hypothesis is probably true. You know, or at least there's some merit to it, I would say.
My my only concern about this, and this is I'm going to put my science teacher hat on for a second, is this is being built in Homestead. And I think Homestead has an elevation of like 6 feet above sea level.
Yikes.
And when I was teaching some of my science classes and we'd look at climate change and sea level rise, and I'd give the kids some tools and look around the country, that southern tip of Florida,
Oh yeah,
south of
holy
Miami,
crap.
Homestead area,
That's like
like,
literally the southernmost tip of the Miami
yeah,
metropolitan
I think
area.
they call themselves the gateway to the Florida Keys
Yeah, holy
there.
shit.
But they're and a lot of people maybe more, well, maybe God, I can't remember when the hurricane, but we had a big hurricane. I can't remember the name of it, which one that came through and really devastated Homestead. So that might be why some people might remember the name as well who aren't from the Florida area. But like it is it is low level, and I don't know how long it will be a viable place,
How
especially if
long it
you're,
will be dry land.
well, and not just, it's not like it's going to be completely underwater, but when you're that low, and I don't know how close the stadium is supposed to be to the water, but if you're talking storm surge, high tides, other things, that's my biggest concern. It's like, great, you found a place, 15,000 seat stadium, another potential. Like, I think this brings up to what we know of USL championship teams that could make that jump in terms of stadium size, because that's probably going to be the biggest limiting factor. I think we're up to about 10, somewhere between 10 and 12 teams. They either have stadium in progress, they already play somewhere that's big enough, something. So they're getting closer and closer to that magic number of 12 that they must have to get started. So that's that's again, I can't not have my science hat on sometimes, but when I heard that and saw that, and I was like, oh, seriously, like Homestead of all the places, like that's the place where you're going to build it. So sorry to,
Well, you could probably get
bring
land
science into
there.
this,
Yeah. No, I
but
mean you're totally right. Yeah, I that's a great point. I pulled up a map. Just like holy crap, it really is like just about one of the last things before you get to the Everglades and the Florida Keys. So
yeah.
we'll see about that.
Yeah. And the last thing I have for USL is they announced, I think it was this morning actually, a new partnership with private equity group, it looks like.
Great.
Um, and then, I tried to do a little digging and I didn't see any major red flags. But one of the things I noticed that this group, they're partnering with one of the businesses they have absorbed, and they do is working with athletes in, not really managing them like an agent, but working with both media partnerships with them, whether they're going to sponsor or work together with a group, or investment opportunities. And I wondered, as I saw this in the background, in light of these several higher profile soccer athletes that are getting involved in investment in USL teams, I wonder if there's been, if that is the group that's been involved in linking with some of these athletes to bring them back in, into the US soccer culture as an owner in a team. And usually their ownership is, less about the financial commitment they're bringing and more about, brand recognition that they're
Right.
bringing to the team, certainly.
Right.
So I was just curious when I saw that. So I'm of very mixed feelings. My bigger feeling is I hate the move into private equity. I hope it works out, but as a general rule of thumb, I don't like, groups coming in to just, I don't see how they can take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I mean I don't think anybody's ever come out on top. after private equity comes in, except the private equity people, of course. But.
Right. Okay, well, that's it for the Cup and lower league news. So let's get into our main topic here about Canadian soccer as the fifth part of our Pro-Rel series. But before we jump into Canadian soccer, because I want to use this as a point of contrast, I don't know, Dylan, if you noticed, it's just in the last couple of days here, or maybe it was over the weekend, that the commissioner of the CFL, the Canadian Football League, announced some major rule changes, basically to get the Canadian version of football. I don't think they said it this way to get it more in line with the American game. They argued it was more for increasing scoring and scoring of touchdowns to generate content to then drive more fans. That was really the steps of logic there. But they are tweaking the game to make it more American. They're shortening the field, so the same size as the NFL. They're putting the field goals at the back of the end zone. They're shortening
Hate
their end
that.
zones,
Hate
but
that.
not.
How is that
They're
going to
shortening,
create more touchdowns? A smaller
and
end zone.
they're getting rid of some of their 1 point, their rouge, and some of their other things that they have in Canadian football.
Well, that's a bummer.
So, and of course, it's generating a lot of discussion, right? There's people who love it and people who hate it. But when I read through and read the commissioner's statements, the things that jumped out to me is they want more scoring. They think this will bring about more scoring and more touchdowns because they're losing. Their audiences have been going down. They're losing younger viewers to the NFL because they like the highlights and what they see in the NFL, or they're watching more NFL than CFL. So they're trying to tweak some rules to bring some people back. But, and they're, again, what I caught is we want to generate more highlights to generate better content to attract more viewers. And as someone who always speaks for getting involved with the community, I think this is totally backward. And it's really going to be interesting to see. Maybe it plays out. I don't know. I do not know. I will be the first to admit I do not know or understand the Canadian market super well to understand how these will go down. Maybe it'll be a big hit.
So
But in
I
the long
actually,
run, my last thing is in the long run, I don't see it being good for the league because it feels like they're trying to manufacture content rather than
I agree.
connect with your community.
So I actually would say that as far as Americans go, I'm pretty aware of Canadian football. I try to make a point to watch the Grey Cup, which is their Super Bowl, every year because I think Canadian football is really entertaining for exactly the reasons that make it different. The deeper end zones, the longer field, the goalposts in front. The pre-snap motion rules are very different,
right.
which I don't know if our viewers are aware of American football, but the way you can move and have multiple people
you can move forward,
pre-snap,
yeah.
right, exactly. It's revolutionary to the game. And I actually like that it's only 3 downs instead of 4 because you get much bigger plays, a much faster game, in my opinion, in terms of like, you don't get these long slogging drives usually, right? It's either like somebody gets a big play or it's a turnover. And so I would actually argue, I don't even know that these changes are going to produce the changes they're looking for. But I think you're right that it feels like a move away from a community-centric model, which I think is like the only thing the CFL really had going for it. Because I'll tell you that people in Hamilton love their Tiger Cats, but it's not because like, oh, highlights. It's because do the average people like even know what Hamilton is? Like, right. It's a team that wears, but right, it's a team that wears the name Hamilton proudly and has been successful doing that. Same thing with Edmonton. Like how many non-Canadians know what Edmonton is and where it is, right? But the Edmonton Elks, formerly Eskimos, are like a wildly successful team with a really local kind of flavor to them. And so I think you're totally spot on that this is a move away from that more USL Pioneer League localized model and trying to appeal to the lowest common denominator, which I don't know. Is being a like more milk toast version of the NFL going to really appeal to people? I don't know that it does.
Yeah, and I bring this up, right, because we're not here really to talk about, we're talking football
Right,
in terms of
right,
soccer, not football in terms of
right.
gridiron football, but I think it provides a really interesting contrast to the next part of our discussion because like this it's very timely for us. It works out perfect for this episode. But the CFL is one of the absolute few Canadian professional leagues that is entirely within Canada.
Hmm.
Most of their other sports, big professional sports, team sports, so, they have teams, even though they may have some leagues below this, but they have a lot of teams that play in our American leagues, right? We see this in the NBA and we see it in hockey, obviously, right? And this has been something that has happened historically throughout the last 100 years, that there has been a lot of crossover between Canadian professional sports and American professional sports. It's usually American leagues accepting some Canadian teams in there. And I think if we look in terms of soccer history in Canada, this has been a huge detriment to the development of soccer in Canada. Not, they still have professional teams, and many of their professional teams in all our professional sports compete well in a lot of the leagues. But in terms of soccer, I mean, this has been consistent for the last 100 years of even though there's some provincial leagues in Canada and when we get to semi-pro and pre-professional, that there's been a history of those leagues like the US coming, going. Some leagues have stayed around for a long time. Some leagues were the top league and then they kind of dropped down. Right. But even if we stick with soccer and we go back to the NASL, there were quite a few Canadian teams at various times in the NASL. And once the NASL folded, even though Canada tried to do or already had some leagues or some teams tried to come back or they tried to restart some things, you had some come play in the APSL over in the US or and we got 3 Canadian teams playing in Major League Soccer. You get teams that were playing in the USL. There were constantly Canadian teams that were trying, they wanted to do the sport. Maybe they don't have enough teams on their own. So you have a Calgary team, an Edmonton team, a Toronto team, some other team that would come down and play in the US so that they could have a professional team in a professional league. And again, if we focus just on soccer, like when I started to look into this, and if you followed any of our other Pro-Rel stuff, usually we start with like a big kind of history. We kind of cover the 100 years. I'll tell you, we think US soccer is messed up. Oh my goodness. Like Canadian soccer is a hot, hot mess and has been for years of people trying to get things going. And I think part of that is because of when something kind of gets started or a good group comes along that might help things develop in Canada, they join an American league instead. And I think, that has been a big kind of history. And, again, to go back to the CFL thing that we're talking about, and I think I'm going to keep bringing this up for the rest of this conversation, is like that was entirely Canadian. It wasn't an American Canadian kind of thing. Even though it was similar to the NFL and they had tweaked some rules and played their own version of it, it's it was just a Canadian thing. It wasn't a Canadian franchise that plays in the NFL. So one of the things I want to do for today is really not jump into the whole history of Canadian soccer because frankly, once I started digging into it, and I don't like to just get some facts. I like to have an understanding of why things happen. But my goodness, finding information was challenging for one. But even finding the information and trying to keep track of how things tried to be on a national basis or a provincial basis really got challenging once you got outside of southern Quebec and southern Ontario. It's the population centers that were there that had good, strong regional semi-professional leagues, just like we've seen in the U.S. But once you get outside of that, that's kind of, I think, going to drive the rest of this conversation. And I'll stop for a second and give you a chance to jump in here. But I think drive the rest of the conversation to look at how, in the last 2 decades especially, there has been a shift in Canada to try to grow their own internal soccer structure, especially at the pre-professional level. And do that like we talked about the Project 2010 last week in the US, do that to help increase their player pool for the national teams, specifically on the men's side, because their women's side has always been pretty strong. But that's what we kind of want to look at, is where they are now and kind of what got them to where they are now. So before we jump into that, Dylan, I'm going to give you a chance to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't super aware of Canadian soccer until the current Canadian Premier League started, like 6 years ago now. But I've enjoyed watching them kind of develop, and I think that for all its faults, Canadian soccer maybe realizes something U.S. soccer doesn't, which is that the bottom of the pyramid is actually what yields you the best results at the top, or the innards of the pyramid, if you will. So, don't get me wrong, Canadian soccer is a mess, but it seems like they have a better idea of what will actually help in the long term than U.S. soccer does.
Yeah, and again, people listening to this may wonder, then why'd you pick Canadian soccer if it's such a hot mess, as to be part of this Pro-Rel series that we've been doing, where we look at other countries and see what we can learn from. And I think there's a lot to learn here, even though it's been a hot mess, but also look at what they've done in the last couple of decades. And, when I always hear people say in this country, it'll never happen, or it'll never happen in my lifetime, or you couldn't pull all these groups together. And we saw when we did our Japan series how quickly that came together when you have focus of what you were trying to build. And Canada got some focus about a decade ago of what they wanted to build. And all of a sudden, in a decade, we have seen a tremendous shift and stability within, that's would be my take on it, within Canadian soccer that wasn't there before, because they kind of followed us. You'd
Right.
have groups of rich people say, hey, we should get something together. We should get a league together. We should do this, or we should get a team and try to get into an American league. There wasn't really a concerted effort to try to grow the sport within the country for a bigger reason, which would then also benefit people who wanted to have professional teams on both the men's and women's side. Okay, so let's we won't do our normal kind of historical dive, because like I said, it's a hot mess and it's crazy, and frankly I need a Canadian to come and help me understand some of the decisions and thinking that was going on. But of course, if we pick things up, say with, well, maybe the end of the NASL, right? So we had some Canadian teams, and then we don't. The NASL crashes, and then Canada tries to start some things on their own, but then Major League Soccer starts up. And by, I double check my notes here. So Toronto comes in 2007, Vancouver in 2011, and Montreal in 2012. So some of your big areas that could support a team, which they obviously do, but also help build maybe your own version of soccer in your country, leave for the US for something bigger to be a part of. Because the Canadian men's, the Canadian women's national team has always been strong. And a lot of that is a product of a lot of females coming to play soccer at American universities. So how Title IX helped the U.S. become a soccer powerhouse, it also helped the Canadian women's team become a powerhouse in women's soccer as well. But on the men's side, not as much. They did qualify for their, I think, only World Cup, but certainly in modern times, their at least most recent World Cup, I guess, would have been 1986. And they did not do well in 1986. But that was a little bit of a change for soccer in Canada, just like it was for soccer in the United States. You know, remember we mentioned last week that Mexico, the US, and Canada all bid to host for the 86 World Cup when they pulled it from Colombia. And we talked about how the US and Canadian bids got thrown out basically, and they really only looked at Mexico to host. And part of that was a lack of infrastructure, soccer people infrastructure, not stadiums. So, in looking at that, the US and Canada kind of got dismissed pretty swiftly from any consideration. And I think for both countries, they looked at harder, like what all the soccer people did, what can we do better? So MLS starts, you got teams going to MLS, and on the men's side, Canada doesn't really ever get back to their 86 glory, which was, you know, I don't know if you could argue it was because of the NASL and people playing there, but them wanting to get back more on the world stage, and the men's team, kind of being hit and miss for the couple of decades after that, while the women's team was very strong. So in the early 2000 teens, I can't remember when it was first started, maybe 2011, the Canadian Federation basically commissions a report and to look at what to do. Do we start? I think if I remember correctly, it's called the Easton Report, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes. And they looked at 4 areas. I don't remember what they all were. One was looking at a professional league. Do we start up a nationwide professional league? That's all Canada. Do we look at a 3rd division pre-professional league? So for them, their 3rd division is pre-professional. And there were a couple other options in there. And what the report came out with, and it eventually came out, I think, February of 2013, and said the recommendation was to go for a 3rd division pre-professional league, semi-pro, professional and amateur, however you want to mix it up, but go for a league there. And that report and kind of the focus on that of overseeing these regionalized, so this wasn't going to be a national pre-professional league, they're going to be regionalized leagues, but with an umbrella organization nationally. So you have pockets of regionalization, and then you could have some kind of tournament or something else that brings your regional champions together in some kind of national championship. And of course, it had mixed reception, but there was a push because of this to try to then develop these regionalized leagues. And the year before this came out, you actually, so maybe we should kind of go like, where does Canadian soccer stand right now? And then we'll kind of fill in the gap between this report and where we are right now. But before we review where Canadian soccer is right now, do you have anything you want to jump in and add? Or
I don't, not too much to add. I do remember that Canadian women's team, like the late aughts, early teens, and they were a pretty consistent thorn in the side of the U.S. women's team. So I know some more recent fans might not think of Canada that way, but I will always think of the like Christine Sinclairs of the world, just scoring endless goals against us. It was a really good team.
Yeah, they've always been good matches, and they've always been strong on the women's side. Okay, so let's look at the in 2025 where we sit with the structure of Canadian soccer. So at what they consider Division 1, which is their only professional division, Division 1, we have a men's league, and as of I think this year is the first year, a new women's league. So we have this is ignoring Major League Soccer. So, I mean, technically, there are 3 Canadian teams that play in Major League Soccer. So you could argue that Canada has two Division One leagues, but for our conversation, we're trying to keep things that are all Canada, not any kind of crossover. So they have one professional league, the Canadian Premier League. They have a women's league. I think it's called the Northern Super League. I think the Canadian Premier League has 8, but it's a national league, a national footprint, across the country. And the Northern Super League has 6 teams. And I'm blanking out now on the footprint for how big it is, but it is an attempt for both of those leagues to have professional soccer in Canada at a national scope or a national footprint, like Major League Soccer is, or the NWSL is here in the United States. They do not have anything that they identify, or I think anybody would identify as Division 2 soccer. But for them, Division 3, they consider pre-professional, whereas we consider Division 3 to be professional. So it'd be more the equivalent of our unofficial 4th division in this country. So that's their Division 3. And right now they have 4 regional leagues. The umbrella organization for this is called League One Canada. And League One Canada oversees, or again, kind of an alliance here of these 4 regional leagues, but they've all branded themselves in a similar way. So you have League One, I'm doing it alphabetical here, League One Alberta, then you have League One British Columbia, you have League One Ontario, and you have League One Quebec. So of their 10 provinces, 4 of the provinces have one of these regional leagues. The other ones do not, that are affiliated, not that they don't have soccer, but are affiliated in this growing pyramid that they're trying to put together. And all that, again, the umbrella organization is League One Canada over that. Now, to talk about how new this is, right? This report we said came out in 2013. Well, League One Quebec actually started their semi-professional league the year before. And using that a little bit as a model and looking towards it, that this idea of trying to build that regionalized pre-professional league, as the report recommended, you had, again, League One Quebec, which started in 2012, and then League One Ontario kind of took up, the first one to take up the mantle after the report to put a league together. They did theirs in 2014. League One BC started in 2022, right? Just 3 years ago. And League One Alberta was 2024. So certainly the pandemic interrupted some things that people were trying to put together. So some of these might have happened a little bit sooner. But we now have 4 regionalized leagues. They have men's and women's teams that kind of fit this pre-professional level that are helping to grow the player pool, both for their national teams. But, I don't think League One ever says this anywhere. And because, it's a different, basically, ownership group for their professional tiers at Division 1, who knows if they'll ultimately get promotion and relegation going. But I want to talk about how quick some of this development has happened. So, right, 10 years, we now have 4 regionalized leagues. Alberta just came on in 2024. BC just came on in 2022. They already had regional leagues in these areas, but it was becoming part of this affiliation and meeting the requirements of whatever they were going to have for League One Canada. Now, Quebec was the one that started. They now have 3 tiers of promotion relegation in this pre-professional structure, just in the really kind of southern Quebec area. So they have a Premier League that they call it. They call it League One Premier. Sorry, they don't. That's Ontario. This is where all the names get confusing. They're going to have to rebrand to get a little better at this. But in Quebec, you have League One Quebec, which is the top tier of this structure. Then you have League 2 Quebec and League 3 Quebec. So you already have in little over 10 years, with a pandemic interruption, we already have 3 tiers of promotion relegation that are happening in Quebec. In Ontario, which started 2 years later, they also have 3 tiers. Their top tier they call Premier, their second one Championship, And then they call it League Two underneath that, which actually has 3 conferences of teams and open ended. So they've grown to that many teams in, about a decade, again, with a pandemic interruption. They're already, I saw on a webpage, they've got 2 expansion teams coming in at that lowest level. And so they've already started to build a meritocracy system in 2 other regions. The other regions that have just started haven't done that yet. But I think it'll be interesting to look in on them in 5, 10 years and see where they are and see how the strength of these programs grow. Because if you keep building up teams from the bottom, you're going to be able to push some of those teams at the top maybe up and create a second division, even if it's regionally. I mean, I don't know how it's going to be nationally, and I don't know if, again, like Major League Soccer here, I don't know if they'll ever connect on their professional side. But this has been a big push by the Canadian Soccer Federation to develop this pre-professional system. And again, in a decade, they have a pretty decent system set up. And at least in 2 regions within a decade, they've got 3 tiers of promotion and relegation going.
Well, and you do wonder too. I mean, I not to like bring geopolitics into this, but you do wonder in like 5, 10 years, how will the large turn in sentiment among Canadians against anything American affect the decisions going into these sorts of things, right? Like, might there become more of a we should try to be less American angle come in, leading to some things we might actually like to see here in America as well? But so yeah, I'm I think that kind of gets back to why we're talking about them, though. It's a rapidly developing hotbed of a place that could try something new if they wanted.
Now, when one of the things I enjoyed, again, to try to pick out things we could use, is there was a strong push to make sure this League One structure had men's and women's side to it. Now, what I described to you is on the men's side. I don't know if the women's side goes that deep, but to have men's and women's pre-professional. But I really like what they did in British Columbia. And I thought it was interesting in terms of accessibility and keeping things, as, I guess, equality, keeping things as equal as possible. But they had their men's and women's leagues. But I think, if I remember correctly, it was BC that required, if a club came in, they had to have both teams. They had to have a men's team and a women's team. They weren't allowing independent teams on either the men's or women's side. You committed to both if you were going to be part of this. So they have 3 trophies that it looked like they award. They award one for a men's champion. They award one for a women's champion. And then they award a combined one. They do aggregate points for your women's team and your
I
men's
like
team
that.
in the top
Yeah.
division. Well, they only have the one division right now. But you combine those and you get a combined champion. So I thought super interesting, because even you might have a team that's not going to win, they're maybe sitting mid-table, but a win could help them, combined with the women's team who might be sitting top of the table, could give them the combined championship, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was super interesting, and I would love to see. We I don't see how it happens here because of the way we structure soccer. Right, they're
Yeah.
independent teams. You can't require a men's team and a women's team. But I would love if there was some strong encouragement. If USL is going to be our place where promotion and relegation happens, and they start, you know, at some point early on, if you're coming in to say League One, and we eventually get the equivalent of a League One on the women's side, and maybe that's part of it. You have to have both teams,
Yeah.
and they don't have to be both League One, like, because over time, right, one could get promoted while the other one doesn't. But you have to have both, and I think that would really that could make things interesting. There could be some interesting things you could do to bring those 2 groups of fans together, to bring, the teams together, the collaboration and working together, rather than what I think happens is people have a good idea about doing a men's team and a women's team, but then one always gets the priority over the other, right? It
Yeah.
happens. One ends up getting the priority. So anything to help balance that a little better within a club, I think is a good idea. But I saw that and I thought that's a cool idea of looking at the aggregate
Yeah.
score across both teams.
Yeah, I really like that idea, but as you said, it wouldn't really work with the way we structure soccer here. And I don't think culturally mandating that a new club have a men and women's team would really work here in America, both because of kind of the existing soccer structures, but also I think with the way that, well, I'm realizing now as I say this out loud, I'm going to struggle to say this without sounding like a red pill incel Andrew Tate loser, but with the way that like American feminism kind of conceptualizes like women's sports as a vessel for female empowerment, I think that they would view that mandate as restrictive because, like, oh, to do a women's club, we need a men's team. And I'm not like trying to say, oh, like women, the feminists, whatever. I'm just saying, like, I think that in the context of like American female empowerment, that would be viewed as a constraint rather than like a boon, if that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I
My
think you could
opinion.
spin that in a misogynistic way.
Oh,
You mean we have
100%.
to have a
And
women's team? And like, right.
well, right.
I
And
think that,
that's, yeah. And that's why I'm trying to caveat this a bunch. Like,
right.
those are not the views I carry. But I do think, like, culturally, I don't know how well that would work
Yeah. Um, I could see it in the bigger picture, but I could see if USL has 3 tiers on both the men's and women's
here.
side,
Yeah.
and people are competing in both, and maybe that's a push. But I mean, we already have groups right
Right.
now that might have a team in the NWSL, and then maybe something lower league on the men's side in the USL, or the other way around, right? So I, yeah, I don't know how that will play out,
Yeah.
certainly, but I think Canada brings up some interesting things for us to consider here in the US. Their geography is huge, just like us. What is a little different in Canada, especially, is they have some strong population centers
Yes.
and really vast lands of little population. I mean, we have that in the western part of the United States, but not, and again, we're only talking about the contiguous United States here, not to intentionally leave off Hawaii and Alaska from this conversation. But if we're looking at just the contiguous United States, we do have open spots that aren't strong population centers that then create huge travel distances. But I think Canada has it way worse than we do
Yeah.
in
They
terms
do.
of trying to navigate that. And they've gone with a regional model, a provincial model to do it, which I've expressed on this podcast. I actually think is also a better way to go for the U.S. But
Yes. Agreed.
it. I think again for each country, you got to look and you got to look at what you have and how you want to grow things. And I like this idea of strong regional pockets that you can grow from, rather than trying to force a national footprint, which is one of my biggest frustrations with the professional league standards in the US. The mandatory time zones along with the stadium size requirements. But that's how we've done professional leagues. We have closed leagues that try to have a big footprint, so you include as people across the country, at least the contiguous United States, feel like they're involved. I think you can still do that, but I think the regionalization piece, we have yet to strongly develop. And I think once we do that, it will help connect down to the local levels and will help push up to the professional levels. But we'll see how that goes on our U.S. journey here.
Well, and part of the issue with that is that in order for that kind of regionalization to take foothold and become an important part of the pyramid, is there needs to be a pyramid, right? Like, it's we enjoy that the USL focuses on these like hyper locale things, but if you really want to densify the amount of like hyper local community focused clubs, there needs to be like the infrastructure for them to exist outside of just as it is now. So it's kind of a catch-22, I guess. I believe technically that is a correct usage of the term. So
Yeah, I'm getting ready to add something to the chat here. So I'm going to send it and then describe what it is here in just a moment. Yeah, it's going to be a challenge both for Canada and for the US looking forward. But again, that is why we brought Canada into this conversation kind of early, because it's something also we can closely monitor and watch. And I've been impressed with what they've been able to do in 10 years. And I hope they're able to continue to grow what they have and make those strong community connections. As they find good teams, they might be able to elevate into a second division and possibly a promotion relegation up at the very top. But with that, I think that kind of brings us to the end of our main topic. Before we get into our final thoughts, we haven't really done a call to action in a while. I have one for this week because I stumbled across it, and I believe it's still open for this first round. But there is a online fan magazine, well, not fan magazine, but soccer magazine. It's called The Blizzard. It's based out of the UK, and the primary person who got it started and put together is Jonathan Wilson as a place to have soccer thoughts and write stories and put things that maybe there were journalistic constraints at whatever publication he was working at. So he and other writers who like to put out some soccer stories, and they have some merch and they do some posters and they do some podcasts, but it's called The Blizzard. The website is theblizzard.co.uk. But they asked people a while back to submit the greatest goals, what they thought, with YouTube links. And then what they did is they picked the, I don't know what it is. We're in a round of 64 in groups of 4 for each. So 64 groups of 4. So 256, is that where we are? So 256 goals. They just randomly put them into groups of 4, and they created a Google form. And the first round, at least earlier today, it was still up and working. You can click and go in and watch the links and pick some goals. So if you like doing that, and I have to warn you, it's very UK/Eurocentric because of where they're based, certainly. But it does span quite a range. There's goals going back to at least the 70s. I thought I saw some from the 60s as well, some early broadcasts. But they're like all these things. There are some fantastic strikes in there. So if you like looking at goals, even if you don't want to do the form, there's 256 links to some pretty amazing goals. Some you may have seen before and some you may not have seen before, but we have the link in the chat. We'll put the link in the show notes. So if you want to do that, this is the first round. They'll have multiple rounds, obviously, and we'll see how it all plays out. I don't know if they're going to take in each grouping that they have, because you're voting for them in groups of 4. So I don't know if they're going to eliminate 3 or maybe take the top 2 and move them on and recombine them into groups, but no idea how they're going to progress through this. But if you want to do it, the link's in the chat. We'll put the link in the show notes, and go ahead and participate and check out some fun goals.
Yeah, you got me thinking about some of my favorites of all time. I mean, I think you can kind of assume there's a couple throughout the history of soccer that'll probably be there. You figure Maradona's goal against England, Bergkamp when he that flick around the defender, that Jack Wilshere goal against Norwich where they just kept flicking around. So Yeah, there will be some you expect to see, but that's fun. I didn't realize they were doing that, and it got me thinking about some of my all-time favorite goals. So that was a nice little trip down
Yeah,
memory lane.
it's a lot of goals to go through, boy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You may recognize some just by names, but I was trying to go through and watch, and there's certainly a lot of English league goals as well. And it's fun if you have some extra time to go and watch some of that. But you know, it might be a lot to do in a single sitting
Yeah, yeah.
unless you have a lot of time. Um, but it might also be worth something to jump into when the list gets narrowed down a
Mhm.
little bit more.
Definitely.
So we'll keep you updated on that as I see it changing.
Sounds good. Yeah. I think
All right.
we should both try and come up with maybe not the best goal we've ever seen, but maybe our favorite. Because I already think I know which one I'd pick, but I need to think a little harder about it.
Yeah, the term favorites can be interpreted in so many
Well,
ways
right, and so I guess what I
because
mean is like
because
the
impact plays into it. Just
sure.
pure technical skill can play into it. Sometimes I enjoy, even though the finish was the last piece, the sequence that leads up to
Well,
a
I was gonna
goal.
say, and so when I say favorite, I mean like a goal that is very pleasing to you, whether that's a long range
That's it.
banger,
Just
right?
pleasing.
Whether that's a passing move, a technical display, a a Hungman Sun all the way across the field kind of run, whatever it is. You know, just yeah. What do you as a football fan enjoy the most out of a goal?
I would say in general, I enjoy a long distance banger.
Yeah, I do too, but I also think that those are overrepresented in best goal lists. I think that the team pass and move never gets the love it deserves.
Right. And totally. And that's why it kind of, what are we talking about here? Right.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And, even like Maradona's goal where in the 86 World Cup, where he dribbles through half the England team, the finish is not outstanding on that.
No,
I
it's
mean,
not.
it's a
It's
nice
whatever.
finish, but it's a soccer finish. You should
Yeah.
score that from that range. It's everything else that leads up to that is what makes that an amazing goal.
Well,
Um,
and the fact that both the most famous and the most infamous goal of all time
right.
were both
In
scored
the
in that
same
game.
match.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love a good volley, half volley.
Hmm,
Like
hmm.
right now, as I'm saying categories, I'm thinking of certain things. I
I,
love a
I
good free kick goal.
I'll tell you my favorite though. Free kicks are good, but the ones where you get, especially a long pass, but really any pass, where it's like they had no right to make that pass, but more importantly, they had no right to even see that pass. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thinking of some passes that have led to goals. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to
Yeah,
see
think
if I can
about it.
come
We can
up
talk
with a
about it next
list.
week. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, we'll bring that up and see. It'll be a good visual for the
absolutely.
video part of the podcast. Not so good for the audio part of the
That's true.
podcast.
We can do our best at color commentary. How's that?
Right. Okay, Dylan, before we head out of here, besides the great suggestion for the goals, do you have any other final thoughts, any soccer plans for the week?
I might try and get to Fair Play tomorrow to watch Spurs EFL Cup third round against Doncaster Rovers. Actually, interestingly enough, they've got a player, Damola Ajayi, who came on, made his Spurs debut, and scored his first ever goal within about 5 minutes of that last season in the Europa League group stage, which was pretty cool. So he's on loan at Doncaster, and Spurs. The FA has very specific rules in England about loan players playing against their parent club. But in the FA Cup, the parent club has the right to allow it, and Spurs have allowed it. So I expect Damola Ajayi will be playing against a lot of his friends tomorrow. So that I think is super interesting, and good. I think good on Spurs for saying like, look, you're there to develop. If you happen to beat us, that's more power to you. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll have fun watching that.
Thank you.
I don't, feel like I keep dropping subscriptions of things, so
Yeah, right.
harder and harder to find things to watch, but I'm sure I'll tune into my normal stuff, Bradford City on the weekend, and really the biggest thing I'm looking forward to. I'm excited to try to get my few trips out of the house. I'm trying to excited to get out of the house and maybe see the round two Open Cup qualifier here in a couple of
Yeah,
weeks. So
definitely. Yeah, we'll have to
I
talk about setting something up. If you're looking at that Logan one as well, I think we should try and coordinate that.
yeah. I think that would be a good one to try, and
Definitely.
let's tentatively plan for that. We'll certainly talk offline, and
Sure.
maybe
I'll reach
maybe we
out
can get a
to
group of people.
yeah, I was gonna say I'll reach out to some other, former loyal local folks and see what's up.
All right. And if you're listening to this and watching and you have a suggestion for either of those two, certainly drop us a line. We love all the comments for the show. You can do it here on our YouTube channel to leave us a suggestion or let us know if you want to join us for one of those matches. So leave it here on our YouTube channel, send us a message or at Blue Sky. You can reach us at soccershorts@bigpinedigital.com. If you're listening on a podcast app, you can use the send us a text link at the top of the episode description to send us a question, comment, or let us know if you're going to be at one of those games. Again, we always appreciate your comments and your feedback, but always it's great for the show and for something. If you can join us 6 o'clock on Tuesday nights is when we usually do our live broadcast on YouTube. We'd love to have you there in the chat and get some back and forth feedback for some of the things that we're talking about on the show. And with that, Dylan, any last comments before we close up for this week?
Yeah, one more quick thing as my subheader there, rematch. I've talked about it before. It's a new-ish game, soccer game.
Yes.
They are finally out of beta phase. So season 1 launched today, and oh boy, they updated the game, and it is good. I am a big fan, and I really think this game has a big future as like an esports game. But most importantly, the biggest thing I can say about it is I was an avid FIFA and Rocket League player for years of my life. I'm talking like 5 for Rocket League, 15 for FIFA. I have not opened either game since Rematch came out. It scratches the itch of both of those games tenfold better than either ever did. So if you are a soccer fan who likes video games, check out Rematch. I highly recommend.
And because I only have a Switch and I'm not anymore a huge console player, they didn't have anything.
Okay, too bad.
But maybe in the future.
Yeah, who knows?
All right. I don't have any less comments for myself, so I'm just going to thank everyone for joining us here on another episode of Local Grassroots Stories, and we'll see everybody again next week. Good night.